The beautiful chicken korma. This is one of my guilty pleasures, and it's a dish that's really rich. It's full of lots of flavour and it uses lots of herbs and spices. It was created back in the days of Mughal emperors, and it was all about using the really expensive spices. It was about decadence. It was about showing off that you were rich. I'm going to show you how to put the dish together, and the first thing we need to do is marinate the chicken. What I'm going to do first is use some saffron, and saffron again is one of those very, very expensive spices. All we're going to use is a little pinch that I'm going to pop in some milk just to steep it to get the colour going. We're just trying to draw out the lovely sort of orangey redness of it. The reason it's so expensive is that it's the stamen of one single flower that's hand-picked, so it's really a labour-intensive process. We're going to leave that to steep, and you can see that it's already starting to change colour. I'm just going to pop that to one side for later on. To get this really delicious dish going, I'm going to start with the marinade. What I need to do is grind up some of the spices, and the first thing I'm going to use is coriander seeds. So coriander seeds will give it a sort of light, fresh zinginess. I'm going to pop in a tablespoon of those. And I'm going to put in some black peppercorns as well, probably just about 3 or 4. And then what I'm going to do is just give that a bash, really, just to start the process going. You don't need to end up with a fine powder, but let's just crush them as much as you can. There you go. You can really smell the zinginess that's coming off the coriander seeds. It's lovely. There we go. So once you've ground them, this is the consistency you're looking for. Not quite a powder, but it's all the seeds have been crushed. Into that, I'm going to put some ginger and some garlic, which I've already peeled and got ready. So I'm just going to pop the whole garlic cloves in there, probably 4. And then I'm going to put some ginger in, which I've just roughly chopped up. There we go. And again, I'm going to give this a good bash so that we create almost like a paste, a really fragrant paste. Whoops. Doesn't matter if it all flies out, it's all part of the fun. So that's it, give it a good bash. Whilst I'm doing that, I'm also going to put a little bit of salt in, just a teaspoon, and that sort of helps to grind the ginger and garlic that's already in there. It just gives it a little bit of friction, so again, take your frustrations out. This is the fun bit of cooking, so let's give it some welly. Right, that's really smelling, really fresh, really fragrant. So that's what you're looking for, just a roughly bashed up paste, if you like. I'm just going to pop that to one side while I get my other bits and pieces ready. So into a bowl, I'm going to put in some yogurt. So I've got here just some Greek yogurt. I'm probably going to put about 3 big heaped tablespoons in. Into that, I'm going to add my paste, which is smelling pretty good. So just use your hands. Just pop that in there. It's lovely. And then I'm going to put a little bit of turmeric in there. Now, a korma is known for that beautifully wonderful yellow colour, and this is where it's going to come from. It's going to come from this turmeric. So once you've got all of those bits in here, the other ingredient that I'd like to add in is some gram flour. Now, gram flour is chickpea flour, so it's just dried chickpeas that have been ground up. And I'm only going to put probably about a teaspoon in here. And the reason that I'm doing that is because whenever you cook with yogurt, there's always a slight tendency that the yogurt can split. So if you add a little bit of gram flour into it, it just stops that from happening. So your sauce will be luscious and creamy at the end. So give your marinade a good mix. It's smelling really nice. And you'll start to see that lovely, lovely yellow colour developing. There we go. And that's the marinade, and into that I'm just going to pop the chicken straight in. I'm using thigh meat, just because I prefer using thigh meat, especially with a dish that's going to have a lovely sauce at the end of it. If you prefer to use breast meat, then by all means do so, but just be careful on how long you leave it to cook for, because you don't want to dry out your breast. But I would highly recommend using thigh meat. Just make sure it's really trimmed down so that you're getting rid of all of that fat. It will just, for me, I think it holds the flavour better, and it just lends itself to this kind of dish really well. So that is your korma marinade done. I'm going to leave this for approximately an hour just to marinate, just to start that cooking process, get all of those flavours and herbs and spices infusing into the meat. So I'm just going to pop that to one side and go and wash my hands. So the chicken's been marinating for about an hour. It's hopefully got all of those lovely flavours infusing into the meat. I'm going to move on now to make the sauce. And as I said earlier, this is one of my guilty pleasures because it's all about the decadence. It's all about using those rich ingredients. And one of those that I'm going to use right now is ghee. And ghee is clarified butter, so it's pure saturated fat. The difference with using ghee is you don't need as much ghee as you would need of oil, but the flavour that you get from ghee is so beautiful. It's got almost like a nutty texture. So as the ghee is heating up, I'm just going to blitz my onions. I'm just going to literally put them into a blender, top and tail them, and just cut them into big chunks. The reason that I'm blitzing these rather than chopping them is because a korma has a beautifully smooth sauce, and by blitzing your onions you're hopefully going to end up with that lovely gentle creamy smooth sauce. If you don't have a blender, just try to chop your onions up as finely as you possibly can. So I'm just gonna, what you don't want to do is puree your onions, but you want them fairly fine. You might need to give them a little push down, but that's looking pretty good. Okay, I'm just going to set that to one side, and I can see that my ghee is heated up beautifully. So into that, I'm going to start to add some of my spices just to get those aromatics going. First thing I'm going to add is some cloves. Probably about 4 cloves is going to be enough. So I'm just going to pop those in. I'm also going to add some cardamom. So again, I will probably put in about 3. If you don't like cardamom, then please feel free to just open them up, take those lovely seeds out and give them a bash and put those in. Or you could just blitz up the whole of the pod and just use probably about half a teaspoon would be enough. So I'm just going to pop that in. For this dish, going back to that whole decadence thing, I like to use my spices whole in this. Okay. The last spice I'm going to use is cassia bark. Now, a korma in this country is known to be almost have that sickly sweet, heavy, not very nice aromatic about it. The sweetness that you get in a korma should be a very natural sweetness, and that sweetness should come from cassia bark, not from bucket loads of sugar that you add in at the end. So for me, this is a very, very special spice. It's got a wonderful aromatic, but it's also got that very gentle sweetness that you're looking for. So I'm just going to pop in about 5 centimetres of that. And as with any whole spice, as soon as you can smell the aromatics coming through, you'll know that they've started to toast and they're ready for their next ingredient. Most people like a korma to be very gentle, very sweet. I like my food fairly spicy, so I'm going to put in a couple of whole dried chilies as well. There's no rule book that says a korma has to be sweet and mild. There's no rule book that says a vindaloo has to be blow your head off. So I like to cook my food the way that I like to eat it. So I'm going to pop those in as well. Into that, we're going to put in the onions that we've blitzed up. Give that a stir, and what we're looking for is a very gentle golden brown colour. Once your onions go in, you want to leave the cooker at a fairly high heat, because what you're trying to do is drive off any of that liquid that's in the onions. It's really important with the onions for a korma that you don't colour them too much, because you want to end up with a beautifully bright yellow sauce. So we're trying to cook our onions, get rid of the rawness, but not add any colour to them. The onions have cooked down now, so they've lost that raw flavour, but they've gone a lovely golden brown colour. We haven't added too much colour to them. Once we're at this stage, I'm going to pop in the marinated chicken, which is looking beautiful. So I'm going to put that in. Oh, it's quite heavy. There we go. Got all of that lovely flavour in there, so I'm just going to put all of that in. Look at that. I'm just going to turn the heat up so that we start to almost seal that meat. And we get a little bit of colour to it. There we go. So give that a good stir. And once the meat's got a little bit of heat to it, you'll see it'll start to just change colour a little bit. And then we're just going to pop the lid on, turn the heat down, and we're going to leave that to cook for about 15 minutes or so before we add our final touches to the dish. That's looking good to me, so I'm just going to pop that there, put the lid on, and we'll come back to it in about 15 minutes. I can hear that korma bubbling, but more importantly, I can smell those beautiful, iconic aromatics of the korma. So I'm just going to go and have a look at my dish. Wow. All that juice and all that gravy's come from the meat itself, so it's looking really good. What I want to do now is put in those finishing touches. So what makes a korma a korma? A korma is all about coconut milk, and what that does is it adds a beautiful sweetness, not like processed sugar. It gives it a natural sweetness, and that combined with the cassia bark just works beautifully. So I'm just going to pop in some coconut milk. That's going to give it a lovely gravy. I'm going to give that a stir. But more importantly than the coconut milk, what makes a korma is almonds. And what almonds do is it gives it that lovely creaminess, but also that lovely almond flavour. But more importantly than that, it's poppy seeds. White poppy seeds in particular are used in Indian cooking. And what I've done here is I've ground them up. If you want to go to the trouble of making a proper, authentic, delicious korma, then I would go to the trouble of actually going out and finding these poppy seeds. You can find them at Indian grocery shops, you can find them online, so just have a look round and I'm sure you'll be able to find them. So I'm going to put in a teaspoon of the poppy seeds. Just a little touch more. The other thing that the poppy seeds and the almonds do together is they help to thicken the sauce, so you get that beautiful, creamy, thick, luscious sauce. So I'm just going to pop in the almonds as well. I'm going to give that a stir through and then just turn the heat up a little bit so that we can start to thicken up this sauce. If you want to later on, you can also add in a touch more of the almonds just to intensify the flavour a bit, but also again help to thicken that up. I'm going to let this sort of thicken for about 5 or 6 minutes, just keeping an eye on it, giving it a stir every now and again. And then I'm going to serve that up, but we'll keep an eye on it just to make sure it doesn't catch the bottom of the pan. Going back to my theme of decadence, I'm going to go back to my lovely saffron that has been steeping in a little bit of milk. I'm going to pour that in, and what that's going to do is it's going to add little flecks of beautiful golden saffron into that dish. And I'm just going to use my finger just to get those last bits out. And I'm going to give that a stir through. As the whole dish comes together, you'll see that it becomes this beautifully fragrant, beautifully lovely dish. So I'm going to turn that off, that's pretty much there. And just to finish off, I'm going to put in some beautiful coriander that I've had waiting on here, just for a little bit of colour, but also a little bit of fresh fragrance to that. So we're going to chop that up. And pop in my fresh coriander. Look at that, it looks absolutely beautiful. If it's good enough for those emperors, it's good enough for us. I'm going to just serve that up. I've got my ladle and I'm going to pop that straight in. Wow, look at the colours, and I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to top it off with a little bit of crispy almonds, just for a bit of texture. And there we are, chicken korma, beautifully decadent and beautiful to eat.